And greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Want to remind everybody, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. There is a PayPal link down there for anybody who wants to share some love. Every little bit is appreciated. And the StreamYard link is pinned down there for anybody who wants to join the panel. Today we're talking about the indoctrination through the public education system. And I find it's a topic that many people don't want to discuss because of their own indoctrination with that public education system. But like I've said many times, I too was a bitch-ass fool. I too was a slave. Greetings, John. How you doing tonight, brother?
Hey, brother Keith. How you doing?
Good, good. Getting ready to get into this little summary I wanted to present in regards to the topic tonight, and that indoctrination in the public education system, and how it truly leads to very certain atrocities, some even on such a grand scale as genocide. Many of you have heard me talk about Hitler's willing executioners. And it's only because of the decades prior to the rise of Hitler and through certain political, economic, religious, education arenas that they became inducible under Hitler to be willing executioners themselves, to carry out the atrocities against their neighbors and to let the government come in and carry out those atrocities. And that's what I see today in this thing where I explain how people are sitting on their couches watching the boob tube, watching somebody else's dramatic or comedic or heroic life while they're sucking down poisonous drinks and eating processed foods. They hear the lights and sirens, so they poke their head out and they see them arresting somebody down the street a couple blocks. They don't do anything about it. They don't even care. So they go back to their cognitive dissonance, their comfort and convenience, conformity and compliance. And the next night, same thing. And every night it just keeps getting closer and closer, but they think they're going to be able to back the blue. But it always happens. You end up back in the blue until it happens to you. You've been indoctrinated into believing that this false patriarch is going to protect you and your children. That this false patriarch is going to be able to provide you with the knowledge of fishing, when in fact you fall victim to the benefit of just taking a fish for a day. It destroys the dreams of our very talents as children by not allowing us to go forth in those talents. So thank you for joining me, John, but I'm going to put you backstage for a minute while I read this little summary, probably 5-10 minutes. And anybody else is still welcome to join the panel. And I would hope I would get some people that once they hear what I have to say will have that motivation to get up here and say something, because this is something that affects everybody. If you've been educated in the public education system, or even in a private school, for heaven's sake, as I always say, don't believe your neighbor, don't believe your government, don't believe your mother, for crying out loud. Do your research so you know. And in that's going above and beyond what you've been taught by expanding the boundaries, thinking outside of the box, having that critical thought process that maybe there's something better. Even though I know how to fish today, what if there's a new process of fishing tomorrow, a new method tomorrow? And the guy that used to fish yesterday has a more efficient and convenient method of fishing today because of that knowledge and its expansion. And when we delineate our children, who are the most ingenious creators as little children sometimes, for that very fact that they have no box that they've been taught to think in yet. So let's look at it. Because I want to explain the public education as the indoctrination, in my view, and how it diverts one's own learning and interests into compliance and conformity in the various economic, political, and cultural arenas, so much so to one's own detriment, and its use as a tool for authoritarian control of a large population. And this is just my opinion, folks, from my own firsthand experiences. And it's about critique that many thinkers, educators, and social theorists have made of modern public education systems, especially in industrialized societies. See, they need that conformity and compliance so that you can fit within the labor force, which is the main mechanism to keep it going in the economic and political venues. This critique centers around the idea that public education can function less as a means of fostering individual growth and curiosity, and more as a system of indoctrination designed to promote that very conformity, compliance, and obedience to the dominant economic, political, and cultural order. This is that democracy, the dominant 51%. And I've said many times, I'd much rather walk alone than in the direction of everybody else going in the wrong direction. So the breakdown is that the origins and purpose of the public education, particularly in modern public education systems, are largely developed during the Industrial Revolution, modeled on factory systems, production lines, military protocol, following orders. And the goals were to produce disciplined workers for industrial labor, to instill respect for authority, punctuality, and obedience. This is why I don't like a time clock. I don't like a calendar. I like when the sun rises and the sun sets, and I can count moons and days. To create homogeneous national identity through standardized knowledge and values. And the key idea is the system was less concerned with developing critical thinkers and more with producing predictable, manageable peoples. The mechanism is indoctrination, and the standardization is of the curriculum for control. It's the national or state mandated curriculums which limit what is taught and how. This is the leave no child behind thing. The emphasis are on rote learning, standardized tests, and right answers, instead of abstract thinking outside of the box with critical thought processes that come up with novel ideas and things. Nonconformity and curiosity are outside of that syllabus and are deeply discouraged. So when a child stands up and tries to tell the rest of the students that what the teacher is teaching is lying, saying that Columbus discovered America, and trying to, in my logic and reason, dispel the idea of the term discovered by notating that the people were already there. So what's the difference between those people and these peoples? Something didn't click. I didn't see the differences. I was indoctrinated into them for a little bit. This often teaches students what to think and not how to think. And it's a suppression of the individual interests of the learners who must follow a fixed schedule and subject matter, often unrelated to their interests. Creative, emotional, and spiritual inquiries are marginalized or labeled as distractions. Children become passive recipients of information. This is how we end up with a nation full of believers and nobody that knows a goddamn thing. Rather than active seekers of knowledge. This is what I talk about being autodidactic. Seeking knowledge above and beyond what you've already been taught. I see so many of our younger generations walking out of these doors of education, getting that diploma, and then not picking up another book. Not learning anything else, not having any motivation to, because they've been fully indoctrinated. And the disciplinary structures as a reward system, the bells, the grades, authority figures, uniforms, behavioral codes, all promote that regimentation in a military construct. Mistakes are penalized rather than seen as learning opportunities. The grading system. Oh, you didn't pass. Hold no child behind because they can't pass. So lower the grading system and that grading curve so they can fit in. That's the wrong kind of equity and diversity to be included. That's the wrong DEI. True DEI is in learning your human rights, learning about your rights and duties as a man. Those schools won't teach you that. Only your parents will teach you that. Surveillance and control are normalized from a young age, and this instills a sense of external control and fear of failure, which are useful for obedience. This is keeping up with the Joneses. This is the climbing that corporate ladder. It's an economic indoctrination that schools rarely teach. They rarely teach about the economic system, the power structures, or how wealth inequality works. They rarely teach how the courts work. The government, they touch on it, but understand that even immigrants are required to take a civics test, which they must pass in order to become a U.S. citizen, but it's not required of a regular American. They'd rather dupe them into a low-grade public education system of indoctrination, because if they learn the true civics, then they would overtake that false patriarch and tell him who's boss. This is the importance of not falling victim to that public education system and the mandate and compulsory education of a false patriarch. See, the compulsory education is only upon taking a benefit provided by the government, free education, that it becomes compulsory. See, it's the mom and dad that register the children for school. And this is a presumption of residency, stating that they're a federal, state, or municipal officer or agent for purposes of taking upon the benefits provided by such office. One of the perks. It's kind of like a anti-kickback law, a safe harbor. Y'all better start learning about this stuff. Instead, they promote myths of meritocracy. Your public good is worth how much your education is, and the better you learn that public education, and hey, if you want a higher education, go to college afterwards, get a better job. That's meritocracy. In this way, education serves capitalist production needs over the personal or communal flourishing. And that's what I'm trying to express here, is that the communal flourishing is at the local level. So local that you have to take over the education of your children again. You have to stop handing it over to this false patriarch that isn't teaching them properly. And in all of their talents, the reading, writing, and arithmetic and all that can all be taught through their talents. Somebody wants to learn how to be work with clay and stuff. They have to learn the weights and measures, things like that, the mixes, the temperatures for firing and all that. Same thing with any other talent. The reading, writing, and arithmetic come with it. A lot of times you can teach your children in history through teaching them literature, by using historical literature to teach them. You can teach them poetic literature by exposing them to poems and songs and music and stuff. But first and foremost, I urge that you follow their own interests, because they're going to excel at those outer things, the reading, writing, and arithmetic that go inherently with their talent, so much so that they'll have a better comprehension of them than most people. The political indoctrination is the civic education itself, and it tends to glorify the state, simplify history, and suppress the dissenting views. See, history is the story of the victor over a victim. The complex events like colonization, war, exploitation are sanitized and omitted. And here I want to talk about this N-word. See, this is where it gets really sensitized. And it's been omitted from the use by white people. Now, the Caucasians. Now, see, it's the Caucasians that first invented the word to call the melanated people the N-word. And now it's so much used by the melanated people that they say the people that created the N-word can no longer use it. How idiotic is that? That's what this education system does. It doesn't teach you where things come from and how they became about that way. They only teach you certain things, and most of it's to deal with your emotions, act emotionally. They don't teach you reason and logic. Students are taught to trust authority, police, government, institutions, rather than to question it. My mother looked at me when I was 48, 49 years old, said, Keith, the police are your authority. At that point in time, despite all the years that I'd loved her, and I still love her, I realized that she was confused. This supports a compliant, politically passive population, which is easier to govern. Now, the cultural indoctrination is the dominant cultural norms, race, gender, language, religion, and they're all reinforced. Reinforced so much so that, like I expressed with the N-word, we have total idiocy, just like legislating plastic straws to end up with paper straws in plastic wraps rather than plastic straws in paper wraps. And no one addressed the real issue of plastics as a whole because they put that plastic straw in a plastic lid on a plastic cup and never mentioned anything about it or the plastic condiment containers and everything else along with it. The marginalized voices are underrepresented in literature, history, arts, education, and politics. Like I just expressed, them plastic straws. The result is an internalized hierarchy and a culturally hegemony people unknowingly adopting the values of the ruling class. That's that keeping up with the Joneses. They want to keep up so much with the ruling class and be so much part of that ruling class that they're going to follow that false patriarch. They're going to chase that bag instead of the treasures of heaven. And we've all been indoctrinated into doing that by our own parents who suffer the same public education system indoctrination. So when somebody does speak out about it, expressing that First Amendment, again, it's inherently everybody else's exponential right to know. This is the importance, again, of teaching a man how to fish rather than just giving him a fish. Because over time, things will get better. We think of newer and better things. We become that novel idea instead of being suppressed. And this erodes diverse ways of being, knowing, and organizing society. Like I said, yesterday's fishermen didn't fish the way we fish today. Psychological and existential consequences are that the students often graduate disconnected from themselves and unsure of their interests, gifts, or values. We hear so many people going on to that higher education and getting that degree and then coming out and not even being able to get a job in the area that they studied for. Conformity becomes a survival strategy, not a lesson. I did that for a number of years, 93 cases. I conformed to a certain degree because it was a matter of survival. I didn't have any better way of doing it at the time. Now I know full well how to say, fuck you, you ain't my daddy, and stand on it. Conformity becomes a survival strategy, not just a lesson. And this paves the way for authoritarianism. People who are habituated to obedience are less likely to resist control or imagine alternatives. I've been resisting obedience all my life, like I said. The voices behind the critique. Many critical theorists, educators, and philosophers have examined this system, including myself, who is none of those. I just have a deep interest in how all this shit's been working against me all my life. John Taylor Gatto, a former teacher, who argued that compulsory schooling trains children for compliance, not independence. First-hand experience from a school teacher from the inside. Nobody listens to him. Ivan Illich in Deschooling Society, a great read. He suggested schools reproduce systems of domination. This is why we have bullying. Mom and dad always send you off to school telling you got to be one of the best students. Best in what way? Noam Chomsky often criticizes the media and education systems for manufacturing consent. The base foundation of a well-aligned government is it gets its powers from the consent of the people. And the consent of the people today is that of an average 8th grade illiterate. That's what's driving this democracy that I call a democracy. Paulo Freire advocated for a libertarian pedagogy where learners become co-creators of knowledge. And this is closest to what I've been presenting to learn how to be autodidactic, learn how to think outside of the box, use your critical thought processes and come up with novel ideas for your own interests and convenience and comfort rather than that of somebody else. And keep it for yourself. I see so many coming up with these inventions and going to the USPTO and hand it right over. Elon Musk didn't. He open sourced it. Everybody's got a right to know. And in that, he makes something great or invents something new, something novel. He open sources it, and all kinds of minds get into it and can start doing things on their own privately and come up with better ways or better things or even a newer thing. And the conclusion is that education as a tool is for liberation or control. If you want to liberate your child, my parents, even though they were great parents and they adopted me and I went through that public education system, they were both federal workers and very highly motivated. And in their free time, every bit of it, they spent whatever time they could in homeschooling me and my younger sisters in what they were doing. Whether it be my dad in the mechanics and remodeling of the house and tearing down a garage and rebuilding it, working on the cars, automotive, started my own lawn care system business when I was a kid, and he helped me learn how to tear down the mowers and fix them and put them back together, weed whackers, all of it. Mom taught us how to do baking and cooking and canning and gardening and all kinds of stuff. It was great. And that's the liberation of your children. It opens the world to their interests and their curiosities that they can then follow and expand upon above and beyond what is offered. And this is why I say if you can homeschool your children above and beyond what the public education system offers, please do it. They can't restrict you in your ability to liberate your children, your heir apparent. They have no authority over biological moms and dads and their biological heir apparents. Everything is done through the term child, which means an adopted child. Understand how this legal and lawful system works. Understand the language by learning it. By learning it. Isaiah 54 for this Christian society that believes so much in being able to provide charity for the welfare of women and children should know Isaiah 54 in whole. As it starts out, sing, O barren woman, even though thou hast not travailed with child. For there are more children of the desolate than there are of the married wife. So this is the First Amendment freedom of expression to speak out, exponentially greater by everybody else's right to know. The last verse says, no tongue, or what is it? Let me pull it up so I get it verbatim. says, no weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper. And this is the important part. And every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment, thou shalt condemn. See, it's not another man's position to judge you. So it's the words they use. Listen to it. And every tongue, every word that shall rise against thee in judgment, thou shalt condemn. It's not telling you to judge or condemn the men. It's telling us we're not supposed to judge men. And in the words that they use to judge us, we shall condemn the words they're using to judge us. This is the inheritance of the servants of their Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord. This is what tells me that we are to study, to show ourselves approved unto God, a workman needing not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. This is the path to liberation. This is what you teach your children, the truth. If you think the public education system is teaching them the truth, then maybe you too have been indoctrinated by that very public education system. And I urge you to think outside of that box. The system was created to train teachers, a Bavarian model in the 1870s. Yep. See what we got here. We got Dean Phillips in the house. Parents can't teach what they are ignorant of. Correct. This is why I put it on the parents' shoulders. You have to get out there and start educating yourself to ensure that the public education that your children are getting is proper and valid, and they're not lying to them. And again, it goes above and beyond that because, like I said, that system provides for the bullying too. It provides for the ordering, the indoctrination of believing that you have a greater authority, even of your parents. Many times we see children being taken authority over by these teachers and CPS over the parents. Objection. And that's because of their own indoctrination, believing that that child is under their care. Therefore, they do, in fact, have authority. And that's a misuse of the term child. You're applying it in a manner that doesn't belong because you don't know. We got Jeffrey Phillips in the house, says, let's go. Dean Phillips says, yes, SS manual suggests a U.S. birth certificate. And as I've expressed before, the minimum birth registration standard says that it has to be registered in the United States. And it's never registered in the United States. It's registered in one of the several states of the Union, but never goes to the United States. Therefore, it fails its standard minimum registration requirements. The very standardization that I'm talking about, they fail at. In elementary, they put a stop sign on the wall to teach us how to go slow down and to stop talking. Interesting. Needless to say, I always had to sit at my own table. Easier but untenable. Oops. Got Silent Walk in the house. John says almost no music education, creative arts, even scripture is missing. How about concise English? Yeah, they still don't teach concise English in school. They still use those terms, child and stuff, as they're used in the legal system without any discernment. Like I said, they're not familiar with concise English themselves. That's something that, even though it was instituted in the 70s, nobody's really taking upon themselves. It was just a common belief that you should know concise English, which means taking all the verbal bullshit out of it and shrinking it down to a concise statement that most common men can understand. Most people can't do that. Concise. Even I need a refresher. That's why I've got a concise English handbook. I need a refresher once in a while myself. It's nice to have it handy so I can look it up. And we got Joe Cool in the house. Links pinned if you want to come up. We're talking about indoctrination, education indoctrination, and the atrocities it can lead to. I'm leading up specifically to Hitler's willing executioners, as I mentioned earlier in this stream, because my next stream is going to be continuing on with this to express how this is relative to Hitler's willing executioners. People that are so willing to be indoctrinated, to believe that that indoctrination has empowered them to being able to keep up with the Jones and be part of that power structure, when in fact they're not. Yep, once you see it, you can't unsee it. You cannot unsee it once you see it. Once you realize the truth and the mechanisms behind it, like I did, I quit carrying an ID in my pocket. The ID I have in my pocket, pull it out here. It's a comical ID. Oops, let me turn my thing off here. None. And this is the ID that I carry in my pocket. And anytime they want to question who I am or whether I have an ID, I whip this out. And of course, they get a nice little chuckle out of it. But it's just as valid as their state ID, because I can't be compelled to carry one that says I'm a resident, which in Iowa determination means for income tax purposes, particularly since I don't have a job. I'm not employed. And by federal standards, that means that I'm a federal, state, or municipal officer or agent whose resident presence is deemed necessary by the board. That's never been done. Therefore, I would be the one lying by saying I'm a resident by having one of them IDs. You understand, people? As long as you carry that ID in that pocket, they know you are lying if you are not, in fact, a federal, state, or municipal officer or agent whose resident presence is deemed necessary by the board. Because if that was so, you would show them the paperwork showing your resident determination, your office or agency. You would have that entitlement, and you wouldn't just be claiming resident. Oops. Let's see what else we got. Joe says he'll come up 6:32 at 6:34. You better hurry up and make that damn taco. Collective stupidity, yeah, could be jack of all trades. It's important. This is why I express to people it's important to understand what's going on so that you can take care of all of your affairs. Because in the end, if you can't and you have to subject yourself to another man, you have to do it in a certain way to protect yourself without that government interference. You have to be able to know how to contract that service or product with that other man without him being so indoctrinated as to not do it with you because he feels so compelled himself to do otherwise by involving that third party intervener officially. Having ID isn't a bad thing if you make sure the resident address is the physical address of the post office. My agent resides in Dry Dock. That would be more along the lines of, and I agree with you there, but the ID wouldn't be a state ID any longer. It would be documentation as evidence leading to a record. And again, remember, folks, the individual's name and number identify the record, no matter what record it is. If it's the individual's name and social security number, then it merely identifies the record. Same with the driver's license, with the name and driver's license number. The name and address provides for the residential record, etc. Correct. And that's what it allows. It allows no one can administer anything on my behalf without my consent. It's taking away the state authority. It's taking away the ability for the state to assume trusteeship in a co-trustee capacity and make you follow their laws as a trustee. They can't do that anymore. You can't change any address out of the territory without it. Correct. You can't do extraterritorial. You can't do special maritime territorial jurisdiction. Let me pull a couple codes up for you guys. Let's see. Screen share. First, we're going to pull up 18 U.S.C. 7. Special maritime and territorial jurisdiction of the United States defined. The term special maritime and territorial jurisdiction of the United States, as used in this title, includes the high seas, any other waters within the admiralty and maritime jurisdiction of the United States, and out of the jurisdiction of any particular state, telling us that the any particular state's jurisdiction is that of land, and any vessel belonging in whole or in part to the United States or any citizen thereof, or to any corporation created by or under the laws of the United States, or of any state, territory, district, or possession thereof, when such vessel is within the admiralty and maritime jurisdiction of the United States and out of the jurisdiction of any particular state. So we go on to 18 U.S.C. 8, which is obligation or other security of the United States defined. And then 18 U.S.C. 9, vessel of the United States defined, as used in this title, means any vessel belonging in whole or in part to the United States or any citizen thereof, or any corporation created by or under the laws of the United States or of any state, territory, district, or possession thereof. Would you be surprised to know that that vessel is the birth certificate, which fails the minimum birth registration standards? And that is the identifying instrument that you use along with the Social Security card to get a state ID, even though it says not to be used for identification. Now, how much further do I have to go on? Now, let's look at 2111 of 18 U.S. Code, which is special maritime and territorial jurisdiction again. And it says, whoever within the special maritime and territorial jurisdiction of the United States by force and violence or by intimidation takes or attempts to take from the person or presence of another anything of value shall be imprisoned not more than 15 years. Keep playing your silly games. Keep playing your silly games. You can't get any documents notarized without some sort of official identification also. So you get two witnesses and you sign a statement denoting exactly who you are, and you get that confirmed in a court order. Now you can take that court order and use that as identification. This is a declaratory judgment. Study the words, not what they seem. Seem spelled S-E-A-M, not what they sow. Exactly. I'm telling you, folks, that link is down there if you want to join. Otherwise, I'm going to continue on a little bit here because the education as a tool for control is inherently oppressive. But the way it's structured and implemented often serves dominant economic, political, and cultural interests. It can suppress individual curiosity, critical thought, and nonconformist identities. And when that happens, education becomes a tool not of enlightenment, as it would pose in the scriptures, like I said, study to shew thyself approved unto God, but of an indoctrination to a false patriarch. A true liberation education would nurture self-direction and inquiry, that curiosity. It would include the marginalized perspectives as being able to think outside of the box. But this requires the open-mindedness of other people, including adults listening to children that might think they're coming up with strange ideas that have no room. I urge people to encourage political awareness and action in their children. Not that you have to be a part of any political party, but understand your place in government as the instructor of that government by consent. It increases their value of creativity, instills a deeper, foundational, bold embracement of their emotions and spirit, not just in obedience to a manual directive, but a spiritual influence that allows them to soar above and beyond those others that might put them down. The identification or license is a security. The question is, who is the secured party? And again, like I said, that identification is fine. But again, that's the thing, in my opinion, strong opinion again, because if you're a holder of that record, then you're a trustee of that record. You hand that identity over. I would not get caught again in my life with that identification on me, period. For that simple thing, you're undertaking a minimum state contact. Care of, rural-free delivery, or P.O. box. Preferential is the P.O. box because that's placing it directly in the hands of the post office rather than a postal carrier, which would be the care of rural-free delivery. But yes, P.O. box. Right in the hands of the post office. Directly responsible, them and the Postal Service employees, responsible for any out-of-balance accounts that must be reconciled with the general ledger. These are the master trust account agreements. You have to establish a master trust account with them. Online Postal One master trust account. The physical address via your unit 3575 to change the agent's address from the old residency to the new residency via the post office. See, now you're posing, and see, this is the difference in that address change. You're changing it from a fleet address to a diplomatic address. Understand that. You're changing it from a fleet address of a resident, an agent in fleet, a crew member of a vessel of the United States, to a diplomatic post office. And you're the diplomat. You're the one that gets to make your word your yay, and your nay, your nay. You've returned to your natural estate, prodigal son. Plenary powers. No longer under contract, but taking care of your own affairs yourself. All right. Well, we've been 45 minutes and Joe's not back up yet. Nobody else is up. Every principal has an agent. The P.O. box is where the principal is located. The agent receives process of service at the physical address. Correct. That estate is the principal. You're putting it in the hands of the registered agent already. United States Postal Service, registered. They are the registered agent of service of process, and that's why they're called mail delivery. They are the ones that process those things. Postal rule. Absolutely. Yep. Many of them do not read their own rules governing post property. Well, that's why you have to put it in the literal sense of the accounting. See, that enumeration at birth, that has to do with the general ledger under the Department of Defense. It's the Department of Defense directive applicable to the Department of Defense. They're the ones that do the budgeting. Why do you think the military has such a grand part of the budget? You think they're going to change that? No, it helps them remain in power. Soft martial law, folks. Yep. And pay attention, folks. Jesse's one of those guys, seems to know what he's talking about. He's putting this stuff in process and work. It's in bond form. Right. It's a securities. Includes all bonds. Means it, and it's in bond form, and it's got 2 seals of approval on it, giving it full faith and credit of the United States. It's already got full faith and credit of the United States because it's put forth by the commander-in-chief and the registrar of the state, who is already chartered under the United States Constitution through that very charter itself. State of the Union, to form a more perfect union. The state itself is a vessel of the United States. So when they create a residency at the state level through that birth enumeration, a statistical record, statist IC, all right, well, with that, we're going to end this one, and I will be back again tomorrow night to continue on to correlate Hitler's Willing Executioners by Daniel Jonah Goldhagen, and how the slow and gradual desensitization of a population to violence leads to their acceptance of the said violence, even on their own family members, and how this is important to the false patriarch, that it perpetrates it, and the separation of church and state. Remember, folks, the German society was very devoutly Christian. So think about this, and we'll see everybody again tomorrow night. You guys know me. I love you, but I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back. And that's to say, I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you don't respect me. And that's on you. So may your God bless you, and we'll see you next time.